All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight and continuing with our Buddhism 101. And we're going to be talking about the afflictive emotions. Continuing along with our syllabus. So we should start with our opening prayers. So we'll do short opening prayers. And then we're going to go and we're going to do, if you have your 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So we're going to recite the 4 thoughts. So if everybody has that handy. So one of the things that we're trying to establish is the routine of the practice. So, and applying it to our teaching. That our teaching and our discussion is one way to put our mind in the Dharma and to use these prayers as a mindfulness to help us to do that. So if we can go to page 1 in our prayer book, in the 101 prayer book. I think everybody should have that. And then we'll recite twice in English, once in Tibetan. And we're going to do pages 1, 2, 5, and 6. And then we'll go to the 4 thoughts. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang war je pe dra no pa je pe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dog now dang drel nur du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to pa ja. The action bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De she du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. We go to the short refuge prayer on page 5. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chodam la, Shangju bardu dagni kapsuchi, dagi jin soki pe sonamgi, Drola Penshir Sange Drupasho. The four immeasurables, the four vast immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe gudang dempa churchi. Dug now dang de now gi gudang drawa churchi. Dug now me pe dewa dang mi drawa churchi. Ne ring jagdang ni dang dwell way tang namla ne pa churchi. Now we go to the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma text. So the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma are precious human life, impermanence, karma, cause and result, and the suffering of samsara. So on page 1 is precious human life. The freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Oh, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains a body which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. So now we'll take a moment and contemplate the meaning of this. So you can close your eyes and think about this. You can read this quietly to yourself, but contemplate precious human life and count yourself as one who has a precious human life. Okay, now we go to page 2 and page 3 are both impermanence. Ka, no matter what is, Ka, no matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a performance or a dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff it departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend anytime, like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. So now contemplate the meaning of impermanence. You may read this over again to yourself, or how it is that it relates to you. Contemplate impermanence. Okay. Now we go to page 4, the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. Contemplate suffering of samsara, sometimes called the faults of samsara. So you can read this again. Think about how it's affected you, how in the past couple days or today. Contemplate. Okay. Now, page 5, karma, cause, and result. Even if one were a king, at the time of death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruits of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the Dharma by distinguishing between what should be practiced and what should be given up. So contemplate karma, cause, and result. Read this to yourself. Close your eyes, contemplate how the past few days has affected you with karma, cause, and result. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments about the opening prayers or about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, or anything about the conversation that we had last week, talking a lot about karma, cause, and result? Okay.
Hey, Lance, I had a quick question on human suffering. The the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, but the all-pervasive suffering of individuality. That one is very subtle, correct?
The all-pervading suffering of composite phenomena, the way it's expressed here.
Mm-hmm.
The all-pervading suffering of composite phenomena. And this is not very obvious to ordinary beings, to everyday beings. Ordinary beings look at a table and they don't think about what suffering went into the manufacture of that table. As one example of composite phenomena, that there was a seed, an acorn or something that fell to the ground, and it required all the different nutrients of the earth and the sun and the rain and everything all to make it grow. And this great tree grew, and it became a home to many different animals. And it became a home, it became food for insects and so on. So this tree had its own ecosystem that was all involved with this tree. But then after 50 years or 100 years, however long it takes for a great tree to grow like that, an acorn, oak tree or something, here comes a human being who decides, oh, I'm going to cut this tree down. And then that human being has to cut it down, has to work very hard to do that. Maybe that human being cut themselves while they were doing it, hurt themselves. They had to struggle very, very much to be able to bring that tree down, the suffering that was there. And then when that tree came down, now that ecology that was the home of all those animals and was the food for all those insects now goes away. So those sentient beings suffer themselves. And then the human being then has to, some way or another, drag that tree to a mill, to a sawmill, to be able to cut that tree down. So what does it take to drag that tree to the sawmill? They put it into a river, and they have to put it tied with other trees that they felled, and they lash them together and they run it down the water until it gets to where the mill is. Then they have to offload it and bring it up to the mill, and they have to strip it down and do all the things they do. And how much struggle did that take? How many hours, how many days of work did that take, and so on? And then the people that work in the mill, and they're breathing the dust, the wood dust and so on, and they have to, and they risk getting hurt. Maybe somebody's cut themselves very badly on the big sawmill and so on. And then the wood has to dry. It's got to be stacked and dry. And then that wood then has to be cut down into usable planks of wood, and maybe it's a table is made out of that wood. But then you make that table, and now you want to finish that table with some kind of painting or something like that. And maybe some 8-year-old kid living in India or Indonesia or someplace, he may be the one painting that table with some kind of lead paint. So we don't see any of that. We don't think about any of that. But a precious human being, one who is on the path as a bodhisattva, sees the all-pervading suffering that went into making all these objects that we take for granted and use every day. So if you use that same kind of formula that I just went through, and you apply that to anything that you see in your room right now, or you go outside and you see things, or you think of things in your imagination, and think about all the suffering that went together to be able to create these composite things. And then think about what it takes to be a human being. That we're born, that we have to go through training, we have to learn from our parents, we learn from our friends, we learn from school, all these things that we go through to make up to be a composite human being, a compounded human being. So again, a bodhisattva, one who is on the path, realizes this and sees this and recognizes this and sees the suffering of samsara, and is there to help to liberate from that suffering. Either it's a matter of attitude, to be able to live in this world and to have the correct attitude to do that, or it's to be able to say, well, you know, I don't want to be born again. I want to be born as a bodhisattva. I want to be born again as a Buddha, something like that. So all this becomes motivation for understanding the tantra of our lives, the continuum of our lives, and so on. So all-pervading suffering is not a simple thing to talk about, is it? It seems like it's something easy, but it's really quite complicated. So thanks for the question. Yes, Louisa.
We can look at the same concept in something that we do every day, we eat. Think about where all that food came from and how it had to be prepared prior to it being food. It grew from a seed, and then somebody had to labor in the field to make that and help that seed grow, and on and on and on. And we take what we take nourishment with has had a long life prior to it getting to our table. There's a lot of people that had to suffer for that too.
So thank you.
Our nourishment.
Yeah. So this is, this is part of being awakened, part of being aware, part of being mindful, and not going through life, with sleepy eyes, not recognizing these things, not appreciating these things. So part of our job as on the Dharma path is to recognize these things and appreciate, be grateful for things, and to have gratitude, humility, and compassion for those who have suffered greatly for this. We don't know, the chair that you're sitting on or the table that you're working at right now, someone could have hurt themselves very badly in the manufacture of that, or harvesting the food like Louisa was just talking about. It may not be obvious to us, but at the same time, somebody somewhere suffered very greatly for it, even if it was the animals who lost their habitat and the insects who lost their food. So we're all connected. Okay. So we spent a lot of time last week talking about karma, cause, and result, which was a very good conversation. And now we need to understand, well, what is it that makes those causes? We talked about what the actions are, the karma. What are the causes? So we talked about this before in prior 101 sessions. So these causes very much are made up of our afflictive emotions. These become the impetus for us to take action, for us to create karma, to do things, as our afflictive emotions, rather than just sitting and being peaceful and remaining simple. When we want these different things, we have to have these different things. So we engage in these emotional responses to phenomena that's happening around us, and we do certain things. So we talk about in Buddhism that there are 84,000 afflictive emotions. And the Buddha, when he taught 2,600 years ago, that he met so many people, and he was, many people told them their problems. And this is where the 84,000 afflictive emotions came from, that he could see that this person had this situation, that person had another situation, and so on like that. But these 84,000 emotions, to be able to comprehend them all individually is very difficult. But if we use logic and we divide and conquer, we find that these 84,000 emotions come down to 5 poisons. So this is what we've talked about before, the 5 poisons. So the 5 poisons, and all their myriad connections, all their myriad ways in which they work with each other, develop into the 84,000 emotions. So these 5 poisons are ignorance, are desire, are hatred, are jealousy, and are greediness or pridefulness. So there's many other words that can be associated with each one of those 5. So I want to discuss that with everybody. I want you all to speak about this and say, well, what do you think about these 5 poisons? And do you think about them at all? What do you think about the emotions? How driven are we by the emotions? So would somebody like to start the conversation?
Well, I've learned over a long period of time from being in the health profession and the well-being profession that emotions, for the most part, begin as chemicals and electrical impulse. So the basis of emotion is a feeling, and then we don't make sense of the emotion or really get to label it until we attach a feeling tone, and until our brain associates it with previous experiences. So that leads me to always assume that our emotions, for the most part, are prompted by remains of our reptilian brain and our early hominid brain, that sort of survival brain in the back of the head. That is the brain that doesn't use words, doesn't cognize. So that's always helped me to understand how these poisons and the emotions interact or have relationships, because the poisons seem to me to be really base thinking, coming out of survival modes. Things like mine and hate, and actions that are happen at the drop of a hat, usually when we're fleeing or hiding, running or defending. So that it makes really good sense to me that the emotions and the poisons do some dancing after they emerge, and after the after the brain and the mind come together and make some sense out of them. Usually the sense is the sense we make does not track our emotions to the body chemistry that produces the original feeling. It usually begins making that sense once the feeling tone has been established. And that might be way too much information, but that's sort of how I see the importance of emotion in relationship to the poisons and their origin.
Okay, thank you. It's a good start. Do animals have emotions? Are their emotions stimulated by the electrochemical beginnings that Michael was just talking about? And are their emotions any different than ours? Or ours more sophisticated than theirs? Does the fact that we have an ego, and do animals have an ego, does that have a bearing on the afflictive emotions? Yes, Gary.
Well, I don't know where this fits, but I think that anyone who's had a pet for a long time that they love very dearly, which I've had more than once, knows that animals are capable of love and devotion and loyalty. Now, I don't know all the chemistry behind that. There are probably some similarities. They do have similar systems, if not exactly the same system, but I think that there is much more energy from them than some people would imagine. And our treatment of animals today, in today's world, in various venues is sometimes horrible. And these are beings with feelings, capable of love, capable of pain. I think emotional pain. I've seen it. I believe it. And so I think to some extent it is true with animals to varying degrees, depending on which animals we're talking about.
Are there intellectual emotions, and are there animal emotions?
Well, there are, and we have examples of that with some specific animals that display almost the capability to reason. I saw recently, and I expect most people here have seen, I can't think of the name, but there was this remarkably intelligent ape that I don't know, died a year or two ago. I can't remember, but she was, Coco, was that her name? And she was capable of interacting with human beings at an extremely high level. And I don't have the personal capability of explaining all the things that she was capable of and how she demonstrated them. But she was a remarkable example which intrigued and attracted scientists and experts from everywhere to observe her. What she demonstrated to us was there's something there inside the animals who are our companions and fellow sojourners in this world. And I have a particular level of concern of how we treat them in hunting and trophy hunting and all other things, and how they feel pain too from the things that we do to them. And they're capable of feeling pain. You can see the behavior, for instance, of elephants, which are highly intelligent animals, when they lose their families. And I wish I was capable of expressing it in a more informed way, but I know that I believe that.
All right, well, let's let somebody else talk about this, and maybe somebody's got a scientific background in this. Zara, I know you work with people with emotional issues and so on all the time. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah. Behavioral health. Yeah. Yes. Yes. People who go from 1 to 10 when something they don't want to happen happens. Yes. And they use all sorts of socially inappropriate behaviors. Yes. As an outward action that we would say it looks like anger, frustration, or some kind of negative, afflictive emotional response with a physical behavior attached. I mean, I think Michael, when Michael was talking, because I read a little bit about, his interpretation or his explanation about the brain, that resonated with me in relation to what he was describing in the development of the human brain and the biology. So that is something I would concur with on a personal level. I don't, that's sort of how I think about it as a immediate response followed by the thinking brain takes over and does something very quickly after you have that. So it's like this quick pairing of a biological flood of something that maybe has a survival feature historically, and then then through the evolution of language, like as humans have evolved, we have these complicated language systems that we attach that sensation, that physiological sensation, and identify it as either a negative or positive thing, and then we act outwardly. So it's like a chain sequence that starts at a cellular level. And language is complicated so much in the world. The ability to think and the thoughts we have, describe them, and society teaches us to associate them as good or bad. Like we get conditioned really early conventionally to have, these judgments and values on them. So on words that describe emotions, right? We're taught they're good or bad, but what if you just can say they're nothingness, they're neutral? What if they're just a word? People make up words all the time, Lance. I was thinking of making up my own cryptocurrency too and putting it on the exchange for fun to see if anybody would buy my crypto. It's going to be called Z Money is what it's going to be called, available soon. So it's interesting, right? When you do a deep dive at an academic intellectual level and think about these processes that Michael started describing. And then you kind of have to laugh at the silliness of it, right? If you explore it, then you're like, oh my gosh, all this shit causes so many problems. And it's really so simple. Excuse me for saying that, but that's what I think about it. That's what I think. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. We may come back to you for reference.
For currents, for Z currency.
Yes, if we need some money, yes.
Okay.
As Zara was speaking, I was thinking, well, do animals experience the same, these 5 poisons? Do they experience hatred in the same way that we do? Do they experience jealousy in the same way we do? I know many animals can experience jealousy, and they can show greed, and they can show desire, certainly, but what do you think about that? Is it the fact that do they let it go at some point, or does it somewhere fester and become our neuroses and become, our personalities and so on? But are animals capable of letting things go in a way that the human beings just hold on to and cause more suffering for themselves and others? Anybody have a thought about that? Yeah, Michael.
I used to have dogs. Now I have a cat, and the cat's maybe four months old. I'm not really sure. She came from under our house, and we Meadow and I love this little thing to death, but she's never even been close to a cat. So she attributes all sort of emotions to the cat. And when she points out, the cat's being jealous, or the cat's angry with her, or the cat's lonely, or the appearances agree. We're used to interpreting animal faces, especially as they sort of resonate with our faces, the way the eyes work, the postures, the movement of the head, and then we usually add the wag of the tail. I think we had tails at one point, so we sort of recognize that symbology from way back when we had tails. But I think appearance is the key word that I used, and we're complicit in the appearances that are revealed to us. I think an ego, as you mentioned before, is probably a prerequisite for a real experience of emotion. And given your question about do they just let it go? I mean, most people know that a dog is reborn every 3 or 4 minutes. They forget everything they knew except what you smell like, and the rigid training that they get that turns into instinct. And so the cat's the same way. Our cat treats us like strangers every time we walk in the room, and the dogs are kind of the same way. I think it requires a little short-term memory as well, and I think it requires sentience, and I may be wrong there. So sentient is a sense of self, and a sense of our place in the universe, albeit elementary and basic. And cats may have that, crows may have that. I got to say, elephants must have that, and whales. And so sentience isn't just human, but I think sentience is required. A sense of self is required to experience a real emotion, to sort of process that feeling tone and make it meaningful. Just my opinion.
When do you think that this is a question for everybody? Do you think emotions are part of our survival, part of being a sentient being, as Michael was saying, but it is a natural part of who we are? But then the question becomes, when does the emotions, if that's true, when do the emotions become afflictive emotions? And by afflictive, I mean that they begin a pathological kind of a movement through our lives.
Well, I think
Lance, do you think you have to, in answering that question about animals, do you think there's a requisite or prerequisite to be able to have the ability to have some sort of recognized language, or kind of like along the lines of what Michael is kind of saying? Otherwise, it's just like these series of short-term or quick sequence behaviors that to us as observers outside of the body of the animal appear to be things we would see in humans as artifacts of afflictive emotions have occurred. I'm asking your opinion on that.
I don't know right now. Let me, Ed wanted to say something. So Ed?
Yeah, I'm not on the same track. I think I was, but in regard to the comparison with animals, I think that afflictive emotions are significantly tied to ego. I mean, my desires, my jealousy, my pridefulness, my greed. I mean, I think all of those things are very wrapped up in ego. And I don't want to say that animals don't have ego, but I don't sense that it's as refined or as multidimensional as ours is. And the more multidimensional my ego is, the more subject I am to afflictive emotions. I think. In regard to emotional responses that we have, I've heard it put forth in various discussions that we develop emotional responses. I mean, as young children, when they may be appropriate for perceived threats that we see at the time, or a world where, there are all these big people wandering around and, we have no control. But what we tend to do is take emotional responses that are appropriate when we develop them. We take them into adulthood and we employ them reflexively in ways where they're not appropriate. I find myself occasionally having an overreaction to something that I don't, when I try to audit the trail, I can't do that. I can see that it's out of proportion, but it comes from something that I developed, before I had any awareness. And I don't know if my dog does that or not, but
Well, with human beings, is it a power thing?
I think ego is a power thing.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think ego is all bad, but I think it's, I don't.
Did anybody read back, 25 years ago or so, a book called The Celestine Prophecy? It was fascinating. And it talked about these archetypes, for lack of a better word, of people, and the way in which they find that they can get power in the family dynamic, in the school dynamic, their friends dynamic, and so on. How beings would use things and see that certain things work for them to have power. And maybe it's what do they call it? When you're not overt, but you're I can't think of the word now. Passively aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Which is fairly, I guess, sophisticated to some degree. Some people can just be bullies, but some people can be passively aggressive and get their way, but they're not perceived as being a bully.
Oh, yes.
So, Zara, let's go back to what your question was before. Can you restate that? Do you remember what that was, or is that gone now?
Well, it's just expanding the academic nature of this conversation by posing another set of, I guess, questions to the group or you, is the idea of how, I guess, and Ed just sort of inadvertently dove into it, but having, so we're observers of the animal species, right? And asking these questions, not inside an animal's body or any awareness that we can at least know or understand as someone experience it. But is there, in answering your question more comprehensively, is there a need to be able to have the capacity to label some form of language, whether it's species specific, like Michael was referencing? Some mammals have advanced or have some language systems we don't recognize, but they certainly are communicating. We just don't know their language. Maybe they have a word for I'm pissed. We don't know that. Who are we to, we don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe dolphins do, or whales.
But isn't that something that is uniquely human being, that to be able to conceptualize these things and
Sure.
thereby to have a conversation about it, that
Yeah.
the animals, the animal world as we might know it, I don't think they do that, do they? Do they sit down and have a conversation with each other, to talk about these things?
You don't know that. We don't know. I mean, like, have you seen all the Disney movies and Pixar movies? They talk to each other all the time. I'm just joking. You can tell I work with children. So, kids think that animals talk to each other. It's questioning what we consider reality, right? Like, isn't all this questioning what we believe and know to be a conventional reality? So certainly, there could be all sorts of other things happening, but for purposes of our conversation, Lance, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah. Within this context.
Is it important for us to do this, or are we just kind of bleeding, we're pounding on our own chest to show how superior we are, or something like that we can out intellectualize each other or something like that?
I think marine biologists, have a lot of evidence that because they've thrown microphones into the deep, and especially around whales and around dolphin types, especially around the sea, the sea creatures that are breathing, that they're just like us. I mean, it's just like it's like the leopard walks into the monkey jungle. I mean, they're just talking constantly, and it's just we don't understand it. But these animals are not quiet. I mean, they're relating about their experience and they're bouncing it all off of each other. And like Zara said, they don't speak English, but a species. I mean, we can't even get each other's language down. I mean, I can't speak Thai, and so that's human. So there's no way that I'm going to judge a separate species. And I'm not going to, I just can't imagine that they don't speak to each other with brains that size and the behavior that shows that they have real compassion and the decision making and caring for their young and working with us the way they have throughout millennia.
Haven't there been a lot of examples of I know there have, because I've read about them, of certain animals, particularly I'm thinking of porpoise dolphin and I think the humpback whale, actually assisting humans in distress in the ocean. I've read story after story. I don't have one on the edge of my mind now. That it has been clear to the human beings who were involved that they were being protected willfully by these animals. And I don't know if there's anyone else here who have seen those examples. I can think of one specific story myself, but which tells me that they do have a sense of will and perhaps even a sense of compassion. It's hard to prove because we use in our experiments, or human beings use in our experiments with each other, types of empirical data and behavioral analysis and things like that perhaps we haven't used to that extent with animals. But I know that I've heard cases with particular types of animals where they have willfully acted out to protect human beings. Now, I don't know exactly what that means in the context of this conversation, but it tells me that they have a capability to assess a situation and act upon it in certain instances.
Did anybody read any of the things that I sent? I guess I just sent them, what, yesterday or the day before yesterday? And there were
I
more of
read
these.
it. This thing on karma.
Yeah, karma and Dharma practice. You know, because
Yeah, I read it.
because what we're trying to do here is to have a discussion about stuff that, you know, maybe we're not, you know, from a classical trained point of view, we're not worthy of being able to discuss these things. But yet, you know, we're still human beings and we still go through these things. And it demonstrates how human beings will begin to fixate on things. And one of the statements that's made in this karma, you know, being described is that's the definition of someone who is afflicted, who has afflictive emotions, that they fixate on these things instead of just being at peace. You know, so what does it take to be at peace? Is that a real thing? Do we want to be at peace? Or do we like fixating and jumping around and being able to have these conversations and so on? What do you think about that? Louisa, did you have a thought about that?
Yes, but I was waiting for everybody else to share too, so I can learn from them too. First of all, well, let me give you a quick example. I want to backtrack a little here on dogs. You know, I rescue dogs, pets. They become pets. But I've noticed that when we have one in the home and then another one comes in, the young one, the new one, always tread lightly because he knows who the boss in that house is. That's the dog that actually lives there. And when a new puppy, a new dog comes in, they know that that dog runs the place until he gets comfortable with the setting. So I just wanted to share that. But the way I see these poisons is that they're so connected and they're so rooted in fear. They have roots, just looking at them, just thinking about them, they're all rooted in fear. Fear of our changing, you know, fear of our getting old, or fear about losing this, or fear of being attached to things that we might lose, fear about running out of money, fear about losing whoever, a loved one in your household or whoever. But they're all based in fear. And even the jealousy and the anger, it's all based and rooted in fear. And so when I see that, I just like, wow. So how does this manifest? For me, I think it manifests as children growing up, and you get the bullying at school, or you get, you know, sent to the back of the line, and pretty soon you got this attitude, and it runs into adulthood. And there you wonder where it came from. So you have to do some work on yourself to explore and bring it out and actually deal with it and fix it, help it, you know, better yourself. But some people don't want to do that. Some people would rather live in that fear. Although they don't recognize it as fear, that's what it all boils down to.
So is that an example of delusion, of ignorance?
Yes, I would say it is. Yes.
It's like hiding away, you know.
Yeah, and then it hides away, and then one day you're triggered by something, and there it is again, because you haven't dealt with it. Then the drama takes over, and your mind just keeps working it to the point where you get sick, you get stressed out, you wonder how you got that way, but sometimes you don't care. You just go on and do the same silly stuff over and over and over again.
Thank you. So I want to bring this back now to just the idea, just, is this a religious examination? A religious examination? Or is this a philosophic kind of an examination?
Well, I think it depends on how you define those two terms.
Well, how would you define it? What do you think?
I think it's probably both. I think to me, it's both.
How is it religious?
Well, yeah. Religion to me is well, I think I'm more comfortable with the word spiritual, but I think all of this has a sense of what it means to be human, you know, what ultimately existence is all about. I mean, these are fundamental issues that are central in all of our lives. And because that to me is religion, but it's also philosophy.
Well, if these afflictive emotions, if we can look at it, you know, as afflictive emotions, do these afflictive emotions bring us together or drive us apart?
I think afflictive emotions drive us apart, and that's why they're afflictive. And a word I would add to what Louisa said, and I think she's right on target with fear, but another word I've heard used in this context is scarcity. I mean, if I desire something, if I'm jealous of something somebody else has, if I'm greedy, and all, I mean, a lot of these are rooted in an idea that I don't have enough of something. I don't have enough security. I don't have enough money. I don't have, I don't have the right kind of relationships. I mean,
So isn't that a poor state of well-being?
say what? Yeah.
That all manifests as a state of well-being, a poor state of well-being.
Right. But I'm just saying scarcity is a theme that runs through these things. I don't have enough of something.
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
If we're not thriving, we're languishing. And that's true that those words to our human minds are linked to resources.
Right.
Yes, Louisa?
When you say thriving, does that mean to you, does that mean in the world, out there in the world, or is it more spiritual within yourself?
The latter. Yeah. I think that I understand how thriving in society or in the work world or at that level can be important to some people, but that's sort of an external judgment. Thriving is a human experience. So I think it's at the individual level, and languishing is very personal.
That question about whether spiritual or in the world reminds me of a distinction that came up in another group, a discussion I was in yesterday, about abundance and prosperity. And basically the the prevailing insight about that was abundance. Abundance is a state of mind. Prosperity is a material measure, in worldly terms. But they may overlap, but they're not synonymous.
And they're relative terms, right?
Mhm.
They're not absolute terms, they're relative terms.
Right. But I can, in fact, have spiritual abundance when I have relatively little in the way of material prosperity, or the other way around. In fact, maybe more often the other way around.
Ed, can I ask you a question? What do you mean by spiritual? Because this is something that I've crossed that has left me pondering a great deal. So I'd like to hear what you think. Then I'll tell you what I've come across, which has left me wondering around that word.
Well, I don't know that I can do very well with that.
Well, it's hard.
I brought it up in the context of contrasting it to my view of religion. My view of religion tends more toward an organized group that at least at some level agrees on some kind of doctrine or some kind of and come together around that. And then there are various kinds of practices and rituals and whatnot, that are then used to support that. Spiritual to me, and again, I'm on thin ice, but is more of an individual thing. Now, you and I could be in a religious community, but our spirituality might be quite different. It's not bound by a ritual. It's not bound by any particular doctrine. It's not bound by anything that anybody else has told me I ought to think. So those are things it's not. What exactly it is, it's some kind of connection with a force that's greater than I am.
What was that? Were you talking about spirituality or religious there?
Spirituality.
Spirituality.
My
a force greater than you are.
Right. Now, an analogy that appeals to me, I don't know how apt it would be, it is, but in the old days of the internet, I mean, when you can only log on about every third or fourth time you tried.
The beginning days.
Beginning days.
You mean that's changed?
So, I didn't catch that, Gary.
I said, you mean that's changed?
Probably not as much as we would like. Not for me today, but
I have work to do then.
But the analogy I would, suddenly you're logged on to the internet. Wow, there's this thing out there, and I just couldn't log on. I just couldn't get into it. Suddenly I'm into it. Well, I have had spiritual experiences that are something like that. I mean, all of a sudden I sense that I'm a part of something. I'm part of a force. I'm part of something that's bigger than I am, that will be here whether I'm here or not, that I am dispensable to. But maybe I can make a small contribution. And in the process of doing that, I can be warmed by this by a larger sense of spirituality. I don't know, Gary. I promised I wouldn't do very well, and I've lived up to my promise.
Oh, well, it's impossible to do well because it's such a widely used term. I've used it all my life, and decided that I really never fully understood what it meant, and I'm still not sure.
Which term is that? I want to make sure I haven't got lost.
Spiritual.
Okay.
What got me onto this, Lance, was in my reading, I came across a statement by Trungpa Rinpoche, who said, to be a spiritual warrior, you must have a broken heart. Without a broken heart and the sense of tenderness and vulnerability, your warriorship is untrustworthy. And I think that what he was saying is that unless someone has been hurt, it'll be hard to develop the renunciation of samsara, or the ways of the world, and have true compassion and equanimity for others. But I don't know if I'm making any sense at all. I mean,
Well, no, that's a very good thing. And Chogyam Trungpa is very insightful. You know, he's a Vidyadhara. There's no question about that. He has a high degree of enlightenment. And that's a very interesting point, that we have to be hurt to know the suffering is to have the compassion. You know, can we just conjure up suffering, or do we have to feel suffering? Is it like the sugar? You know, you can talk about sugar, but you can't appreciate it till you taste it. You know, can you talk about suffering, but you don't appreciate it until your heart's been broken?
Yeah, I think that, you know, in the things that I read, we talk about emptiness, and that everything, all phenomena is an illusion. And it's easy to say that, but it's the difficulty is in understanding what the causes of suffering are, and you can't do that without having deeply experienced the pain of existence.
Well, that's
probably my speech is wandering around here, which is proof of how confused I said I was in the first place.
Well, let me bring it back. Let me bring it back to the Dharma, because here you see, this is why we study the Dharma, because the Dharma gives us this fabric on which we can weave this embroidery, and we can make these things, you know, mean something to us. So the point I want to get to is, you just said, can we? Well, let me put it this way. What I was thinking about when you were talking was, what if we're a God? If we're in the God realm, you know, we talk about the 6 realms of human being, and there's a Deva realm. I'll use the word Deva instead of God, the Deva realm. And the Devas, they don't have suffering. It doesn't exist for them. Until all of a sudden, everything turns around, and they're at the end of their cycle. They're at the end of their life, and everybody just leaves them. And now all that adoration that they were getting and everything, and then they have this fall. They have this fall. But up until that point, they were completely deluded that they were Devas and that they were immune from that. So my point is that it is a point of view about who we are as human beings. And we need to be able to have a context and be able to examine that, to be able to look at that and see, the suffering that we're going through. The devas were suffering the whole time. They just didn't know it. They were suffering from delusion. And then all of a sudden, it became apparent to them. It finally appeared to them that they were suffering, that their life was ending. They were going through impermanence, and that there were 6 human realms. And the devas are human beings, just like the other 6 realms are human beings, and so on. And to be able to see that, and then to take responsibility for it. And that's going back now to the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. This is what it's reminding us of, is the 4 thoughts talking about karma, cause and result, talking about the suffering, the 6 realms of suffering, and be able to see this and be able to see the trap that we allow ourselves to get into over and over again at different junctures and so on. So I think you said, or Ed said, somebody said that, that we don't realize that, what is going on until our heart is broken, until we realize, until all of a sudden the delusion is revealed.
And then, I love the idea of heartbreak being essential, because for me, heartbreak it equals loss. So it's loss of certainty, loss of solidity, loss of our assumptions about the structure that we believe is inherent out there in the world. It's sort of loss of faith. It all just disappears once it actually disappears once you begin to see the true nature of the world anyway. So I think part of the bodhisattva path is letting go of a lot of those things, a lot of those attachments that are unreal. But for me, heartbreak is something disappearing that I love. And
You say disappearing? What do you mean?
Disappearing. It's something that is no longer there. It's a loss.
Because you're transcending it? I'm not sure if I understand.
I think gradually we give up what we believe to be true, because we see
So we
that
become cynical? So we become cynical?
No, that's that causes heartbreak. That's that sense of loss that we loved what we had. It's a sense of loss when we realize that we as humans can never have absolutely true intimacy, because we can't be in each other's heads. It's a sense of loss when we realize that what we think we know about what we're looking at after in the world is not true. It leaves a vacuum, and that's
okay.
Yeah.
So that's that to me, and we can talk about, is a non-spiritual point of view. But one who has a spiritual point of view realizes that there is this indestructible spiritual nature that is within myself that everyone shares, that can't be destroyed. And that's what I've got faith in.
Well, I don't think you can take it for granted that because somebody's spiritual that they can cut through all the crap and see that.
Well, it depends on what level of perfection they're at.
Yeah.
And is there a perfection? And what does that mean to us as ordinary human beings? Can we achieve that perfection? Do we want to achieve that perfection? So, we're studying this because we're trying to understand Buddhism, but we're not forsaking any of the other traditions. We're saying, okay, each one of the different traditions, Christianity, Jewish, Hinduism, or so on, they each speak to the same situation, the same problem or whatever. and have a way of approaching it and so on. And here in the Buddhism is what we're looking at. And that there, we say that there is this perfection, but the perfection's not in the human being. It's in what the human being has a potential of being, what we say, the Buddha nature, the true nature, the awakened nature. It would be the same as the Christ. It would be the same as God. It would be the same as Vishnu or whatever. Does that make sense?
The Rigpa is awfully lonely. If we're used to having company, if we're used to having others,
well,
and we lose our sense of others when we gain a sense of oneness. So now I'm sounding like William, but
well, we used to say, we're alone together. So let's turn this around. We got a little bit more time to talk. So we've been talking about, what these 5 poisons are. We've been talking about whether it's human or it's animal, whatever, and everything. So now, what are the antidotes for these 5 poisons, for these afflictive emotions? What are the antidotes, and where do they come from? So if we talk about ignorance, what's the antidote to ignorance? Luis is mouthing the words, but I can't hear her.
Wisdom.
Okay, how do we get wisdom? What is the antidote? What is the antidote to ignorance that speaks of wisdom? We've been over, huh?
Yeah, for me, I guess.
We've been over this many times in 101, and there's one word I'm looking for that really nails this.
Meditation?
Nope.
So experience?
Nope.
the Dharma.
If you're ignorant, what brings you out of ignorance?
Knowledge, information,
Okay. Education.
education. Okay.
Education. If you're ignorant of spirituality, your ignorance of science, your ignorance of whatever, it's the education that is going to be the light that is going to illuminate that darkness of ignorance. So it's the process of education. So what is the antidote then to anger?
Loving kindness and compassion.
Loving kindness, yes. Not getting angry. Although somebody may be coming at you, you may be having angry thoughts in your mind. Somebody's coming at you with anger, their anger. What turns that around? What neutralizes that is what Louisa just said. I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to absorb your anger with loving kindness. So then what is the antidote to desire?
Generosity.
Nope. And we've been over this many times.
I'm thinking of the back of that card right now, the graphic.
If you're in meditation
Mhm.
and all of a sudden a desirous thought comes up,
So
how do you get rid of it? Or do you follow it down the rabbit hole and now your meditation is ruined and you get up off the cushion and you just are swamped by all this thought of desire? Or is there one thing that you can think of that is going to make that go away?
Equanimity.
The faults of samsara.
Well, generally it's the faults of samsara. That's what we're looking at. Yeah. So we're looking at what's the antidote to the fault of desire. So it is meditation. It is circumspection. It is being able to withdraw from the situation and being able to look at that and be able to not be attached to it, to be able to gain a perspective, to meditate, to transcend, is how we get out of desire. What about jealousy? How do we get out of jealousy? The poison of jealousy or envy. Jealousy and envy are two words that, are kind of interchangeable depending on what point of view you're looking at it. So what would you say the antidote to that is?
I'll say again, generosity.
Jealousy?
Generosity.
How does generosity overcome jealousy?
Recognition of my own worthiness.
Say it again.
I'm looking back through my notes here.
Well, what was it? That was good. What was it?
Recognition of my own worthiness.
Right. In other words, that we are capable of that which we are jealous of.
Right. I think.
So so we were talking about having a poor sense of well-being earlier, and the jealousy arises out of that. I'm not good enough. But if you recognize that you are, if you have faith in yourself and faith in your system that you are applying this to and everything, it overcomes jealousy and envy.
Yep.
And then the last one is, what is the antidote to greed and pride? Michael?
Generosity.
Yeah, if we're being greedy, means, oh, I've accomplished this, I've gathered this, I have this, and I'm not going to share it with anybody. And not only that, I feel like I'm better than everybody, therefore my pridefulness because of my greediness. But if we share it with people, if we are generous with it, that's how we overcome that greediness, that pridefulness, by sharing it. So saying this and then practicing are two different things. But to be a meditator, to really be a meditator means that you expose yourself to these things, that you, to use what the example that we've been using tonight, that we allow ourselves to break our heart. And then faced with that, how do we transcend that broken heart with these antidotes? And if these are not embodied within us through our practice, then they just escape. And when we are in that situation of meditation, our meditation is lost. Or, as we studied in the Bardo Total, we just spent 10 months talking about, bang, we're reborn again. Which is another way of saying that our meditation is now blown away, and now we're reborn as a confused human being instead of being reborn as an enlightened human being. So we have to practice these things in meditation to be able to get to the point of the Bardo Total experience, to be able to have a rebirth that is a noble rebirth. So knowing these things is important. Does anybody know Richard Alpert? Ram Dass? Anybody know Ram Dass? Baba Ram Das, Richard Alpert. Richard Alpert was a psychologist in Harvard during the 1950s. And he was a great leader. He was, him and Timothy Leary did a lot of research in psychedelics. And they were fired from Harvard and all this kind of stuff. And then Richard Alpert became a real fanatic religion guy. And he went to India and he found his guru. And he was a guru practitioner and did all this. And he had millions of people who were following him and buying his books and everything. And he wrote a book called Be Here Now, which became a foundational book for, you know, the 60s and 70s for people who were into that kind of philosophical, religious experience, spiritual experience, and so on. Fantastic book. And like I said, he goes on these speaking tours and everything, and he's been doing this all his life and everything. And he reaches the age of 60 something or other, and he has a stroke. And there's a film called Fierce, what was it? Fierce, it will come to me in a second. But he has this stroke, and he's being wheeled on the gurney down through the hallways of the hospital. And his mind was, he was conscious of what was going on, but at the same time, he wasn't doing anything to be able to help himself in this moment of these moments of terror. And what happened, what he realized was, what came out of this was that he realized that his spirituality was just a veneer. It was just a veneer. And that he realized that he really wasn't the embodiment of all that he was teaching, all that he was talking about. He really hadn't, he'd gotten carried away with his own philosophy or his own intelligence or his own ego or something like that. And then for the remainder of his life, you know, he didn't totally recover from the stroke. He had his awareness, but he lost, you know, one side of his body and all this kind of stuff. And he went on speaking tours, and he was speaking about people about being real, you know, of what it really is to be a meditator, what it really is to be a spiritual person. You know, and if it doesn't matter to you at that point, when would it matter to you? You know, we're at that point of going from this life to what is another life, or whatever you want to call it. If it doesn't matter to you then when would it matter? So I'm just making the point about practice, about being able to become the embodiment of these truths, whether it's Christianity or whether it's Judaism or it's Hinduism or it's Buddhism, whatever, to really get down to the fundamentals of the causes of our suffering and what are the antidotes to those causes. So what do you think about that?
I want to go back to your education being an antidote to ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and this is a bit tongue in cheek, but Michael, you may remember from the Johnson Center, this is a big student center at George Mason. On the wall there, at least when I was there is this quote from our former president, George Johnson, who was quite the philosopher, where he says, this is posted on the wall, the enemy of education is not ignorance, but expertise.
Okay, what does that mean? What do you think that means?
Greatest enemy of education is not ignorance, but expertise.
So what does that mean to you?
That means that to me that education is a journey. And if I think I've arrived, I'm in trouble. And
Right.
the people that think they've arrived are less able to learn than those that are ignorant and know they're ignorant.
I agree. Yeah, that to me the same thing.
Yeah. But so it's just kind of ironic if education is the antidote for ignorance, and yet the greatest enemy of education is not ignorance, it's expertise. I mean,
Well, is the conceit or what? The conceit or the arrogance that
right,
can become the afflictive emotion of the education.
right. Yeah,
You know, I know it all.
yeah,
I remember when I was 40 years old, I thought I had that.
yeah.
You know, I went through that period, 40 years old, man, I got my career, I got my family, I got this, I got it all together. It's cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Whenever you think you've arrived, you're in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
The success is being on the path, the perfection is the knowledge of the imperfection.
Yeah. Going back to I may be getting further afield here, but the idea that you've got to have a crash. I mean, you've got to have. What was that you said earlier, Michael? A heart. Okay, I'm for
Broken heart. A broken heart.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got to have heartbreak. Heartbreak is somehow a prerequisite for growth. Emily Dickinson wrote a poem, and I don't know where, I don't remember it clearly, but she was talking about some high-level athletic contest like the Olympics, maybe, and she says the one that has the understanding of victory is the one who loses the race. I don't know. I just sort of conjured up for me as you're doing this. As long as you win the race, you don't have an opportunity for growth. Nor do you. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's just out in left field somewhere. I don't know.
Well, what about, the experience of the challenge, and what can you derive from that? You don't necessarily need to be the best. It's just accepting the challenge and working through the challenge. That's the point of the all-accomplishing wisdom. That's the point of how we overcome jealousy, by knowing that we're worthy. We're worthy to work on the challenge. I'd love to be a brain surgeon, but I don't have all the ability to do that. But I can still buy some books. I can still study it. I can still do some things about that. I don't have to sit there and just sulk about that I'm not going to be a brain surgeon.
Somehow that's an image of you that I have trouble conjuring up.
What's that?
Sulking about not being a brain surgeon. Just doesn't fit.
Why do you say that?
No comment. I don't know.
You see, because what comes out of this, I'm gonna make an example of that, because what comes out of this is a confidence.
Mhm.
And that confidence is a transcendent thing. You know, you develop this confidence, you recognize this confidence, you recognize your true self, and you recognize that there's this balance that you take with you in all situations. And you can say, well, this doesn't work for me, but this over here does, and I can be happy with that.
Mm.
And there's a confidence in life, you know, that is really important, is really good.
Yeah.
And we all have that potential. You know, that's the laughing Buddha. You know, in the Pure Land, they talk about the laughing Buddha, you know, the rotund Buddha who's got this great jocular smile on his face and everything. And he's just satisfied. We talk about it in Medicine Buddha, you know, the 12 aspirations of the Medicine Buddha. And for those that don't have proper clothes, those that don't have proper food and everything, those that don't have proper teaching and education and so on, that through learning the Medicine Buddha, they will all of a sudden have all these things that they've been wanting. But it may be all, you know, it's all relative. It may be all just small things. But the point is that they're happy with whatever they have. Who has less than a monk, a Tibetan monk, or I should say not Tibetan, but a Buddhist monk? Who has less than a Buddhist monk? Nobody. They have nothing. By definition, they've given it all up. And they're happy about it.
So spiritually, they may have abundance,
Yes,
but they don't have prosperity in worldly terms.
correct. And that's not to say that they're all, you know, able to enjoy that. Many of them realize, you know, are in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, they haven't realized that. But those that have, you know, it's a wonderful thing.
Right.
And we don't have to be a monk to appreciate that.
Sure.
You know, we can be 75 years old and appreciate that, and living in suburbia and having a family and doing the things that we do and so on. So that's why I said making an example of that, you know, is an attitude. So the paper that I sent you, you know, about Dharma practice, you know, here, it says the first sentence here, it says, Dharma practice, to practice the Dharma means chiefly to nurture the qualities of trust, diligence, and insight. Trust is to have confidence in the teachings and the one who taught them, in the Buddha and the Sangha, the upholders of the teachings. Diligence is what carries you through to completion. Inside is the outcome of listening to teachings, thinking about them and applying them. So this is great wisdom. This is great support.
Mhm.
So anybody else got any comments? What do you think?
There's a typo in that sentence.
Yeah, I think so. There's
It says inside instead of insight.
oh, okay. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Insight is the outcome. Is that
Yeah.
the word?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So what does this mean to you? You know, is this inspiring to you in any way, or is this deflating to you? Is this arrogance to you? What do you think? Michael, what do you think?
Most of the time, this is the way I live.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Okay, this is a discussion group, you know. You can't find something to say. Yes, Louisa.
It's inspiring to me because it lights up something in my mind that I want to know more about something. I want to be able to understand it, to apply it, to see how it's going to work for me. I have that desire to do that. And it's become a passion.
Is it good to be passionate? Is it good to be passionate about this?
Yes. For me, yes.
Is there a trap in there somewhere?
Well, the trap would be if you get attached to it so much. It would be the attachment. So you got to just understand it. I would say I'll use the word spiritually and how it works in your life, but not to become attached to it, because it too can become something that'll be too binding for you, and so you don't want to get attached to it. But then nonetheless, you want to look at it and see what it means, how meaningful it can be in your life too.
Very good. Thank you. Ed, you got your microphone on.
I don't think I have anything to add.
Well, with the other group that you were talking about, that you said you were in a group that was talking about some things last night, that sounded very interesting, you know, and sounded like that's a very good group. Is it similar? I mean, into what we're talking about here?
Yeah, we're reading a book called The Art of Uncertainty by Dennis Merritt Jones, I think his name is. But but it's a book about how that brings up all kinds of discussion about how you try to make sense of all these ambiguities. And that's where the abundance prosperity contrast, you know, came from.
I see. Zara, you got your microphone on. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say something earlier because I've had the privilege to participate in this particular session over. I'm actually trying to actually speak less frequently and let others speak, because I'm a speaker. I mean, I will talk nonstop. So that's what I was going to say, because you said it was a discussion group. I said my target behavior is actually to do more active listening and less talking. That's where I am right now on my journey with you all, is to be a better listener of other people's words.
That's good. And truthfully, you know, Ed has been he created the impetus to make this, you know, a more of a discussion group. We've been talking about these things for a year, you know, more with this group here, mostly, and now it's time to talk about, you know, all the myriad things, a way this involves us, and I think it's been very healthy. I've enjoyed it very much.
It's quite lovely for you to say, Lance.
Yeah, we get to hear our habitual tendencies. Gene, what do you think about this? You've been quiet these past couple of weeks. What do you think about listening to this tonight and last week? Your microphone is muted. You need to turn your microphone on, Jane. Still can't hear you. You haven't turned your microphone on yet. The lower left-hand part of your screen is a little icon that shows a microphone. And you gotta unmute it. It's gotta click on it. Still don't hear you.
She knows how to do that. It's just something,
All right.
something's awry.
All right, Gene, sorry that we're not hearing you. We'll have to move on. Okay. Tom, you've been quiet tonight. You have any comments?
Just one. Just remember all perfectly enlightened beings here. We just have to realize it. That's it.
What, say that again, Tom?
We're all perfectly enlightened beings here. We're already enlightened. We just have to realize it.
Yeah, essentially, that's true.
What does that mean, Lance? Essentially, that's true.
That our essence is enlightened. Our essence is mindfulness. Our essence is truth. Our essence is the true nature of the Christ or Buddha or whatever you want to call it. You know, that's what our essence is.
Okay. But it is, well, it's splitting hairs. Is there a difference between saying that's essentially true and that's true? I mean, is there a function of the word essentially?
I think so, you know, because the truth, as we've seen in politics, can take on many alternative meanings, depending on who's listening, you know. But when we say essentially, then we have to question, well, what is the essential? What is the essential ingredient here that we're trying to get to? And in my mind, it forces us to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Where is the essentiality in this? That's why I use that word. And that's a meditation all by itself.
Well, Tom, I wish I felt that I were enlightened.
Oh, you are, Mr. Jones. You really are. I listen to you. I hear you.
And you're enlightened. Poof. Really.
Right. Yeah, there's a book called No Boundaries. You might enjoy reading that. It's a short book, but it talks about the essence of thought, the essentiality of thought, written by Ken Wilber, who I've mentioned many times. And it's a great book. And it's a short book. It's maybe 125 pages or something like that. All right. Well, does anybody else have anything to say before we do our dedication for tonight? So this was an examination of the causes of karma. The causes of karma and the results of the causes of karma are the 6 human realms. And that's why it's all relevant, you see, and it's all tied together. So the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma is all compacted into our discussions that we've been having. So with critical thinking, we need to be able to pull it apart and put it back together again and see how this works together. So essentially, we may all be enlightened, but if we've still kept the mud covering up the enlightened mind, then we don't recognize that enlightenment. So we're using this system to help us to clear away the mud that's covering up that essentiality of our mind, of our thoughts, of our spirituality. Okay, so we do our dedication, please. We'll do one dedication on page 21, the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun. And just to remind you, Lord Jigdan Sumgun lived 800 years ago and is the founder of the lineage, the Drikung Kagyu lineage, which is our lineage of Dharma Surya Center. So for 800 years, it hasn't gone away. It's continued on. And this is the lineage of the yogis, the practitioners, the realized practitioners who are now yogis, who are in union with the essentiality. So we recite this together out loud with our microphones on or off so that we don't bleed into each other. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, or the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Mahamudra is the mind of enlightenment. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you.